Welcome, everyone, to episode 79 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan, coming to you from the continent of California. I am the host of the Gully Blanchard podcast. This was originally a one-man podcast. Ended up bringing two of my best friends into the podcast with me. We had to go do some different things with life, but so I got back to doing a one-man show where I pretty much just talk to interesting people about stuff that I find interesting, whether it be basketball, football, wrestling, social issues, really whatever's going on, the flavor of the week at the time. I like to talk about, those sorts of things. Usually the podcasts are pretty wrestling heavy just because I am and have been a big wrestling fan my entire life. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which is GULLYBLANCHARD. You can check out all 79 episodes of the podcast by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you pretty much you get your podcasts, we are, by searching Gully Blanchard. We're also on nocoastbias.com, where you can also check out all past episodes as well as the wrestling writing that I do from time and again. And then for Sacramento Kings writing, you can check that out at royalpain.com. But this week, I wanted to talk to some pretty interesting people that I enjoy following on social media about wrestling. There's a lot going on with everything from Super Showdown, heading into the Evolution pay-per-view, stuff like that. The reality is, if you're listening to this podcast, you're generally a pretty big wrestling fan, so you're gonna get the results no matter where you go. What I like to do on stuff like this is just talk to interesting people about how they got into wrestling. Tied into what's going on now in the world, what may have special moments they might have had with wrestling in the past. So without further ado, Kellen, Daniel, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much, man. So where can people check you out on Twitter? I know it's where we kind of came across each other, but you're a great wrestling follow. So where can people check you out?
Oh man, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at Kellen Daniel, KELLENDANIEL. And that's pretty much it, man. No blogs, no nothing like that. I just do it for the love. Let my other friends take care of that and help out when I can.
Thank you, man. Yeah, you're definitely helping out by coming on today. I want to get into what happened last night. For those who don't know, Conor McGregor fought Khabib. I'm not even going to try to get near his last name because I'm going to get it wrong. But it was a great fight. To me, at the end of the fight was kind of similar to WrestleMania 13 with the Austin Brett double turn. It felt like Conor left that fight as the ultimate babyface, and now UFC has a marketable heel against the rematch. But what were your thoughts watching the melee and the clips after the fight, Kel?
I thought it was wild. First of all, I thought it was wild. I'm not that well versed in UFC. I found out later that apparently that's the guy that Conor threw whatever he threw through that window, right?
Yeah.
That's the same guy?
Yeah.
Also, I heard Conor was talking about the man's family and disparaging his religion and things like that, and I'm trying to figure out how Conor McGregor walked out of that arena as a sympathetic figure after that melee. Honestly.
Yeah, to me, and I can say this as someone who's half Irish, we got to just stop messing with people about their religion or their family. And, like, I'm not a Conor fan. Like, as a fan of pro wrestling, I kind of get the gimmick where he's the loudmouth, brash, arrogant. But there comes a time where, like, you're talking about the man's family, you're calling him a rat, you're calling him a terrorist. Like, this isn't something where you just kind of half-heartedly throw those insults around and people are just cool with it. Like, eventually you kind of got to own up to that kind of stuff that you talk about. And I think, he came across the dude in Khabib, but just got tired of hearing it. And I am fully on Khabib's side with that, where I said Conor came out as, like, in a weird way as the babyface, to where, like, if you watch the clips afterwards, like, he looks like the weirdly sympathetic figure coming out of all that, which is really strange to me because, like you said, he's disparaging the man's religion, disparaging his country, but yet he's still beloved. And now they've got Conor Khabib too lined up when they want it.
Oh, for sure. And I think at the end of the day, that's all Dana White is worried about. The one thing I will say about that fight at the end is that I didn't agree with whoever jumped in the octagon and started beating up on Connor after the fight, that I didn't agree with, because that man had just finished fighting and lost lost said fight. So
Yeah.
I didn't really think that was the best move. But as far as Khabib doing what he did after the fact, I yeah, he shouldn't have done it, but I don't necessarily blame him for acting the way he did.
Yeah, I think there comes a time like Connor and that whole camp, like they're chippy. They like talking about, they like trying to get into their opponent's skin. And I think eventually not everyone's going to be cool with that. Not everyone's here for those kind of theatrics. Like you can only disparage that man's religion and that man's family so many times until he's just gonna have enough of it. And I think that's what happened with Khabib.
Well, that, and I think that after a certain point that Connor is going to be, people are just going to be tired of him. Like,
Yeah.
you can't be that loud for that long and expect people to ride with you through, you know what I mean, through hella high water. Like, at some point, everybody's going to be like, bro, just shut up. Like, just stop talking. But talking is what gets him paid. So,
Yeah, and I think he's the only real mainstream mainstream UFC guy that WWE had. Or God, I kept doing that. I kept doing that last night too. He's the only mainstream guy that UFC really has, because Brock's in and out. Bones is always being suspended, but other than that, he's really the only guy they have that brings in the casual audience.
Yeah, and I think that they would love for it to be somebody else too, right? Like, I think that they would love for it to be Daniel Cormier. Shout out to Lafayette. But Daniel's boring, man. Like he's a boring guy, and he's a great fighter, and he speaks so well. As stupid as that sounds, but like there's nothing unless he's in there with a John Jones or somebody like that, then nobody's really paying to see his fights.
Yeah, I think he has a hard time bringing in the casual audience on his own. I think when he has like a John Bones in there with him, he's pretty good at bringing in that casual crowd. But
if he was it shouldn't be.
Yeah,
I was about to say, I feel like it shouldn't be that way, right? Because his fights are good. Like none of his fights have stunk. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But he just doesn't have that voice in him to bring in a casual audience, like you said.
Yeah, so I want to transition into wrestling, man, because that's really kind of how I came across following you and a bunch of other people that are mixed in with wrestle rap. But how did you get into pro wrestling? Was it something as a kid? Did you find it as an adult, or what were some of your earliest memories?
Man, I remember my earliest memory of wrestling is probably goes back to, man, when I was like 4 years old. One of my teachers let me borrow or made a tape for me. It was SummerSlam '88, and I don't know if that was the first time I had seen wrestling or if that was the first like big show that I remember watching. But after that, I was just hooked.
Yeah, man. For me, I think it was WrestleMania 5 where the Mega Powers explode, and then I remember getting the VHS of WrestleMania 4 because that was the tournament that they did, and it was like a double VHS, and I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world at the time. But what's kept you in it over all these years? Like, who are some of your favorites that you can still go back to watch on a pretty consistent basis?
Talking about growing up?
Growing up and even into now.
Okay. Growing up, man, I was I'm from Louisiana, so I feel like I had the best of both worlds. So I watched both WCW and WWF. I feel I used to love I just remember like storylines being good. Like I feel like work rate wasn't really a thing like growing up, you know what I mean? But like the stories were important, and if guys could tell a good story with each other. So I think that guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels being my favorite, guys like that, a lot of mid-card guys, man, that I thought would be bigger than what they were or should have been bigger than what they were. I was always a fan of like mid-card guys. Like the main event always was what it was. Like I loved Randy Savage. Loved, Jake the Snake, all those guys. But I was more of a fan of like the mid card guys, the guys who had a little bit more move set, I guess, things like that.
Yeah, I think a good example of that for me as a kid was I was a big Mr. Perfect fan,
Yes.
just because he was literally he was perfect, but like he never seemed to miss on like the gum chewing flip or like there's the gif now where he would throw the towel. Yeah, he would throw the towel behind his head and he didn't caught it. He was just someone that was smooth and impressive in everything that he did, and I always wondered why. Because I know he had some matches with Hogan, I think on like one Saturday night's main event, but like he always seemed like him and Hogan really never had like a big time run that could have like main evented a pay-per-view or something like that. And I always thought that, I always wondered why guys like him or Rick Rude or Jake the Snake never got a chance to wrestle Hogan, because it was always like the bigger guys. It was always like your Big Boss Man or your Akeem or stuff like that. I always wondered why. I kind of gravitated towards those guys as a kid. Like the Intercontinental belt was probably like my most favorite belt to watch the matches, but I think the heavyweight ones were the more sort of entertaining just because of all the pomp and circumstance around it when I was a kid.
Right. Yeah, I definitely feel like Mr. Perfect was one of those guys that they like missed the opportunity on. And I say missed opportunity, just hindsight being 2020, but like he was never going to have that program with Hogan like that. I don't think that him and Hogan were boys. And I feel like it's been well documented that that Hogan only liked to work with his friends. You know what I mean? Like get his friends in positions where they can succeed. And Perfect would have been great. Like that would have been a great feud for Hogan. But I don't think that Hogan. I don't know if he could have gotten a good match out of Hogan, honestly.
I think Perfect was pretty good at getting a good match out of just about anyone in WWF and in WCW. I just think the styles would have been real difficult, I think, for Perfect too, because a lot of what Perfect I think did well counteracts what Hogan was in there for. Like to me, Perfect was more of like a faster paced work rate kind of guy, and Hogan was like a slow, methodical, keep one move on and get the most out of it.
Right. And yeah, he definitely was. And just the fact that I just think Vince didn't want like those average size guys. I say average, wrestler size average size guys in the ring with Hogan for like big programs.
Yeah, what's funny is we say average; those guys are probably like 6'3", 250. That if we saw them like at the street, be like, "Oh man, these guys are huge. These guys are jacked." And Rick Rude himself, like Rick Rude was. I remember watching like a pose down with him in the Ultimate Warrior on like one of the Royal Rumbles, and I was like, "Man, Rick Rude is like hanging with them as far as like from a size standpoint." But still, like Rick Rude was always portrayed as like a smaller statured kind of guy, which is really strange. Because when he got to WCW, he was definitely put in that main event spot with guys that could work, like Flair and Sting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think Hogan held a lot of guys back, and to not his credit, but it made sense. You know what I mean? Like it made sense for them to keep the belt on or around Hogan at the time because that's where the business was. Like that's who was bringing in the most money, and that's who people wanted to see for the most part.
Yeah, it's tough because you have guys like Perfect or Rude, or even when Jake had his heel running, those guys can't really be the main event. They can't really be the champs just because it was such a good guy territory, and Hogan was out there, on the lunch boxes and on the Regis and Kathy Lee's. It would be hard to have like a consistent heel champion during that golden era.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right on that. I feel like, yeah, you would love to see that belt have been passed around a little more during the heyday, to where more guys could touch it and have a run with it. But you also got to think that a lot of that wouldn't have made sense. Like the programs were more they were drawn out back in the day, right? So like a guy being a champ for a year and a half is, you know, that was normal. So it wasn't a lot of room or time for guys to be hot shotting the belt back and forth.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that back then had to do with the fact that the landscape's so different now to where there was really only 4 pay-per-views. There was the big 4. There was WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. And as we fast forward to like the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era, the Tout Era, and where they're at now, like there's a pay-per-view every month. So those stories they do have to kind of hot shot them, and they get them going as fast as they used to.
No, for sure. Like they built up um, to, you know, they built angles what 3 4 months at a time, so they had time to develop a story and and really flesh it out in those 3 or 4 months up and leading up to whatever pay-per-view they were leading up to. And I kind of miss that, man, honestly. I do feel like it's too much wrestling on TV these days. And I know that's a good thing for the wrestlers who are, you know, getting paid, but it's just a lot of overload for me, just overkill.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now, and especially with like so much stuff that goes on with the network, with them doing like the big shows in Australia, they're doing the one in Saudi Arabia pretty soon. Like, it's so hard because even for me, and I'm in my I'm in my mid 30s. I can say that out loud, but like I come home and like watching Raw is a full 3 hours. Even if you skip, with the advent of DVR, if you skip commercials or you skip bad matches, you're still watching a good hour and a half of wrestling. And then Tuesday night, same thing, like still watching a good hour and a half of wrestling. And then you get to NXT. So by the time you're on Wednesday night of your normal work week, like you've watched 5 hours of wrestling. And I just, with Twitter and with GIFs, like it's so hard for me to do that, where I feel like I could just read the highlights of stuff online.
That's it. I mean, bro, I haven't watched a full episode of Raw in probably, I would say, close to a year. Same with I don't even check for SmackDown, but I acknowledge that SmackDown's probably the better show. I catch up on the things I need to catch up on, man. I can't sit up here and act like I've watched every week. I don't. Like you said, you're in your mid 30s. I'm in my mid 30s. We have lives. We have things we have to do, responsibilities, work, all that. That's another job that I don't really feel like putting that much time into, trying to keep up with all the goings on in WWE.
Yeah, and it's tough just because, like I said, there's 3 hours of it. And I think the only thing that I could probably watch a full 3 hours of is an NFL game where my team is playing. Like, I couldn't sit there and watch 3 hours of Dolphins Bengals just because the product itself it's not that entertaining. And my time is spent differently. I think that's why with the NFL, the red zone has done so well, is that you can just literally watch highlights the whole day and you could have it on in passing while you're doing other things.
That's fair. And the league, I feel like the league makes it hard for you to be a fan of players.
Yes.
Because I can watch, there's somebody on probably every team that I would enjoy watching. You know what I mean? But they don't make it to where whoever the best player on whatever team is the focal point of the game. So that makes it hard for you to watch a team that's not yours.
Yeah, now I know you're in Louisiana, but did you get a chance to go to either WrestleMania 30 or 34 when it was at the Superdome?
Yeah, I did. I went to both of them. Did the whole weekend thing. That's a good weekend. Even if you're not a diehard wrestling fan, like you can go down there for the weekend and there's all kind of events and stuff going on that you can bring a casual fan to, and they'll still have a good time.
Yeah, no, when I first moved back home from Vegas, I live in Northern California now. I got a chance to do a couple of the events that happened at 31. So I got to go to NXT. I got to go to WWE Access. But what's funny is I had a choice to go to WrestleMania 31 or go to NXT. And at the time, I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, 31 doesn't look that impressive on paper. It ends up being one of the best WrestleManias of all time. And I ended up going to the NXT show, which was cool because it was like the first show where you saw Hideo Itami do the go to sleep in the crowd. And NXT definitely had a different feel to their takeover shows at the time. But yeah, I definitely want to get and do like the whole weekend cover to cover, like do a couple indie shows, go to a fun town, you know, go to the NXT show, and then go to Mania.
Yeah, I actually met some real cool people this past year at WrestleMania, and that made the trip better. I also went to NXT for I forgot which one it was, but the takeover in New Orleans. That was a really good show. That show was probably almost better than Mania. I felt like Mania was just too long, man. I can't like if I can't watch 3 hours on TV at home, like I'm damn sure not about to spend 6 hours in the Superdome trying to watch all these matches.
Yeah, that's the hard thing for me too, is watching a full WrestleMania is such a chore. And I think if anything, it does a disservice to the competitors, because I was really interested for Roman Brock. I think it was their second Mania, but like, because I thought 31 was really good, but by the time they got to it, I was like, I'm tired. Like, I just want this show to end because I want to go home from where I am. Like, I was exhausted.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I think that I thought the match at 31 was amazing. I thought it was. I was talking to a friend of mine before the match, and I was like, man, in order for this match to be good, like Roman, like he's got to go in there and beat Roman up, and that's like everything I told him what would happen in the match or should happen is what happened, and I was really surprised that they just had. I don't ask for much in my wrestling. I just wanted to make sense, and that made total 100% sense. Go ahead.
I actually want to go back a little bit, staying with Brock. I want to go back to 30 because I had a friend of mine who was at the Superdome at 30 and I think that one of the two things that were most memorable from 30 were obviously Daniel Bryan winning, but I want to talk about the streak ending, man. Like put me there when you're watching that match and how the crowd was. Like, what was your reaction watching Taker lose to Brock at 30?
My reaction was my initial reaction was confusion. I think a lot of like being that the Superdome and big stadiums like that are so big that it's almost like a wave of like information. And I wasn't first level. I was first level, I think, but I was closer to the ramp. So, they were good. They were decent seats, but they still weren't like, I'm not ringside. So like whenever I saw the 3, it didn't register what I had just seen. Yeah, I don't think it registered with anybody really. And then you could just kind of feel like the gasp of like people just circulate throughout the arena. And then when they put the 21-1 on the screen, that's when it hit everybody like, oh, he lost. He really lost.
Yeah.
So that's really like all those reaction shots they got of the crowd, like that guy just like with utter shock, like that was probably 70% of the reactions in the Superdome that night.
Like I remember watching it, and I remember it was the first big event on the network. So I was like, all right, cool. I don't have to pay like $50 to watch this or find a stream or whatever. And I remember it so well. Like it was after I did my first Super Spartan, which is like a 9-mile Spartan race. It was my first one, and I was completely exhausted. Like my body was fatigued. I was tired. So I was trying to get up as little as I could and move around my apartment. And I remember walking around my apartment like as he hit the third F5, and I was like, okay, cool. Like Taker's gonna kick out because Taker always kicks out. And then, like I heard the 1, the 2, and the 3, and like I stopped and I was like, wait, like that's 3. This really happened. And then you see like Heyman come in masterfully and do that thing where he couldn't believe it. And then they panned to the crowd, and I was like it blew my mind watching it back and forth on the network. So I just always find it interesting when I talk to people who were there and like what their reaction was to seeing that live.
Yeah, it was just a shock. I don't even remember being that into the match. I thought the match was like
I didn't think the match was good.
Yeah, I didn't think the match was good at all. But whenever they counted the three, everybody was just like, it was just like nobody expected it to happen.
Yes.
So I think that, and that's what Undertaker matches were up until that point, right? Like, yeah, you were just hoping for a good match, but you didn't expect him to lose.
Yeah. I thought his match quality dipped at 29. I think, I thought Punk carried him through WrestleMania 29, carried him to the best that he could, and I thought.
I didn't even think that match was that good, man. I'm like, I like CM Punk fine enough. I don't have anything against him in ring wise, but I don't think that he got the best out of the Undertaker that night.
Yeah. I think that was the first feud to me where I really started having a problem with Taker coming in in February, working with a full timer, and then leaving right after Mania, just because like I felt there was so many, and this could be like the old school fan of me where I'm used to these storylines building up, with both guys being there week over week, and I thought, Taker not being there really didn't do much good for the feud, because I thought they could have told a good story, even though like the feud never really made sense to why it started. But I thought there was a lot of missed opportunity there that, Taker might not have been able to get a good match with Punk at Taker's age, but I thought they could have told a better story leading up to it.
Yeah, and I think that's where, to your point, where him being around more would have benefited the whole angle. Yeah. Just because it's hard to build an angle around a guy who is only going to be around for one part of the year. So you kind of have to build the angle around him being around that one part of the year, right? Like, just you have to act like he's a part of the crew for the month and a half, 2 months, and go from there.
Yeah, I thought Bray Wyatt got hit really bad with that at WrestleMania 31 too, because it was like Bray pretty much was having that feud with himself. Like Taker wasn't there for any of those Raws or SmackDowns leading up to 31. He just shows up after never really being back on TV since he lost the streak a year ago. And I think him doing that, and then not only him beating Bray, I think was a really hard thing for Bray to deal with afterwards. Just because it seemed silly. Like what you were telling us is, hey, this up and coming guy is about to lose to an old man who you guys last saw losing the streak, and he's just going to show back up and beat this guy. But we expect you for the next 8 months to still believe in Bray Wyatt. And I thought they did Bray a huge disservice there.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I think I think Bray got hurt from that whole angle more than we know. The residual effects. I mean, not like physically or anything, just how people perceive him. Because I think that who did Undertaker fight before Bray? It was CM Punk, or was it?
It went Punk, Brock, and then Bray.
Yeah. So the fact that Undertaker's coming off of a loss, nobody expected Bray to win that match. Like, yeah, you could beat the Undertaker once at WrestleMania, but you're not gonna beat him twice back to back.
Yeah.
At WrestleMania. And I think that's where they kind of booked themselves into a corner, because that didn't benefit Bray Wyatt at all. And I feel like at this point, if you're gonna have a feud with the Undertaker, it shouldn't benefit the Undertaker at all, unless you're Triple H.
Yeah. Which they did that with the Super Showdown in Australia, and they're kind of bringing. It's like the end of the era again, but this time it's the end of the era, but in like a couple of years it'll be another end of an era. Where I guess now they're looking to do Kane and Taker against Triple H and Shawn at the Saudi Arabia pay-per-view. I don't even know when that's coming up, but I think that's where they're trying to get to, which, I mean, I guess for nostalgia's sake, it's fine. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I'm sure there's a market of it. There's a market for it that's bigger than my fandom.
Yeah, it's called Saudi Arabian money.
Yeah. It's literally, yeah, it's literally the crown prince. Like I'd read somewhere the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, like he went to Vince and tried to get like Yokozuna and the Ultimate Warrior for the show, and he had to be like, well,
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I heard that basically he's just paying Vince to like fantasy book a show.
which would be the same thing that I think we would do if we had the Saudi Arabia money. Like, oh, just bring me Bret Hart, bring me CM Punk, bring me Shawn, just have them all entertain me.
I was joking with a friend of mine because we were talking about this very thing, and I was like, "Man, wait till that Prince finds out about the Montreal Screwjob." It's like like he's watching WWE Network on like 10, 20 years behind.
Yeah, he's probably wondering where like the Disciples of Apocalypse and Nation of Domination are at.
Right. So, I mean, he must be paying those guys a crazy amount of money.
Yeah,
But I'm not opposed to, I'm not opposed to it happening if it exists in like some kind of alternate universe, like alternate WWE universe, if that makes sense. Like these things only matter on these super shows out of the country that don't necessarily affect what's going on with the main roster guys, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I'm all for it because my problem is even when Punk and Rock had their feud, or when Punk had his feud with Taker, it just made him look so bad because like I'm fine with part timers. I totally get that like these guys drew a lot of money in the past. You know, there's name value with them, but they shouldn't be beating the guys that are there 11 months out of the year. That's where I have an issue with it.
I feel like it's hard to put those guys in those situations because they have to be the face in the feud, whatever's going on, because they're coming back and people want to see them. So you take them, a part timer, and nobody wants to see a babyface lose. So you stick them with a full-time heel who it doesn't really benefit from them being in the ring with this part-timer if all they're going to do is just get beat by the part-timer.
I think one of the only exceptions to like the part-timers coming back and being baby faces was Batista when he came back for that WrestleMania 30 run, which I might be in the minority here. I didn't think his run was really that bad. Like,
no, it wasn't. They had a plan, and they didn't take into account how over Daniel Bryan was.
Yeah,
they didn't take that into account at all. So
yeah, like he even at the Royal Rumble, like obviously that was Daniel Bryan's win, but like I didn't think his run was really that bad. Like the Shield and Evolution had a great match at Extreme Rules. I think it's Extreme.
They had a nice string of matches that both Batista and Randy Orton was actually really good in that feud. I didn't think he had a bad run either. I just think it wasn't what they wanted to happen.
Yeah, I don't think the fans wanted Batista to be the guy that got it over Daniel Bryan, but I think if Batista would have just came in and did like, did some other babyface stuff, it would have worked out pretty well. But just he was the guy who was holding down Daniel Bryan.
Right. I think I've always wondered if they did a reverse course on that whole angle, or if the triple threat was always going to be the match, because Batista wasn't there. He was never going to be there for long, right?
Yeah, Batista wasn't supposed to be there for long.
Right. So I don't see him. I don't see them putting a belt on him for WrestleMania for like a month, and just to have him drop it to Daniel Bryan. That didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But they've made less sense to me in the past. So.
Yeah, man. What were some of your? Because I know we're both big fans of the Attitude Era. What were some of your favorite memories of that time?
Of the Attitude Era?
Yeah, because I know you're a big Rock fan. So, do you have some favorite Rock moments?
Just promos, man. Anytime he got on the mic, it was I mean, I knew he was going to give me something. But as far as favorite moments go, Jericho's debut definitely,
Yes.
um, definitely one of the my favorite moments. Just like little obscure things, man. Like I'm sure you follow it, but that '90s WWE account
Yeah. The GIF one. Yeah.
is it's so good for finding random clips that you had just forgotten that happened. So those are always fun to watch, man. Moments I always liked when Shawn Michaels would return, because it always felt like he was gonna come back for another match, but knowing what we know now, that was probably not gonna happen, obviously. Um, what else? Just Austin was on fire. I liked, man, I really liked the the Heart Foundation.
Oh
I
yeah.
felt like, yeah, I felt like they didn't really get enough time to work how they should have. I thought it was genius how they were over in Canada and hated in the United States. Um, what else, man? I liked. I was a big Brian Pillman fan. I thought that Pillman was going to be great, um, but we know that injury had other plans for him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a lot, man. Just a lot of different things. Um, a lot of misses. A lot of people don't talk about the misses from the Attitude Era because
Oh,
the
there were
the
a lot.
hits were so good. There was plenty of misses, and even those are fun to look back on.
Yeah, I know. Talking about the Heart Foundation, that one to me, even watching it back as an adult, I think I. That's one thing I like about the network is you get to go back and watch some of these old Raws or these old pay-per-views, these old promos. I liked Pillman a lot as a kid just because of how different he was, and even now as an adult, like just understanding how different he was, and how he was sort of that crazy hype man for that whole, even when he was back, even back before the Heart Foundation when he was with the Horsemen, and that to me, like that inclination of like him, Rick, Benoit, and Double A, like that's my favorite inclination of the Horsemen, just because of how different all of those guys were. Like, Benoit was amazing in the ring. Pillman at that time could still go, and he was really finding that loose cannon character. Double A and Flair were still as consistent as ever, but Pillman to me was so different because even in a time where guys were taking more chances, he felt believable. I think that was the thing with Pillman's crazy is that you didn't feel like it was a manufactured wrestling character. Like you felt like that dude literally was going to do or say whatever. And I think that's one thing that I understand why it's missing in the current product, just because they can't have a Brian Pillman, like they can't do the Pillman gun angle and then try to do like a Make-A-Wish the same night. Like you can't do it
Right.
anymore. But yeah, I think Pillman's character was just so different and so creative and so fresh, even for that time.
I think it's the same reason that Bray Wyatt can't really be Bray Wyatt because
Yeah.
it's just a different time. Like Bray Wyatt should be on the Undertaker schedule if they want him to succeed. But going back to what you're saying about Brian Pillman, bro, I loved, like, I've never seen someone's character shift that drastic in a wrestler from when Brian Pillman was in the Bengal
The Bengal
print,
Trunk? Yeah.
the mullet and all that, and then 94, 95 comes around and he's like loose cannon horseman. Like I loved that angle. Like Brian Pillman getting the horsemen together, like helping Arn Anderson be Ric Flair and all that. Like that was just great. That was like, for as much that as WCW has done to piss off and ruin what they built up. That was a really good, really well put together angle.
If you get a chance, there's a really good book it's about Brian Pillman. It's an autobiography by a writer called Liam O'Rourke. It's called Crazy Like a Fox. I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon. If you get a chance, man, check it out. It is an amazingly well detailed book about Pillman. Like talks about his time in the CF. It talks about his time in Canada. Goes really in depth some of the issues he was having in WCW, ECW, and WWF. And it was a book that I think I finished it in like 4 or 5 days, and I was super busy. But it was just constant new information that you wouldn't have known about him. So if you get a chance, I'd really recommend checking that out.
You know, my wish list right now, bro.
Definitely, man. So I want to get you out of here on 2 things. I know you're big from Louisiana. I am a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so I finally got to see my team win the Super Bowl last year. What was it like watching the Saints get that ring?
Man, that it was fun, man. That weekend was fun. We actually, so my dad is a huge Saints fan, and I used to mess with him all the time. Man, what if the Saints, wins? Like, what if they go to the Super Bowl? Just pipe dreaming. Yeah. And he's like, man, if they go, we going. Like, just, and whenever it was after the NFC Championship game, and we all came down from our highs, and I was like, man, so what's up? And man, he true to his word, bro. He got us some flights and got us a hotel, and we winged it for the weekend. We had a good time, man. I had my old man out in Miami till like 4 o'clock in the morning. It was,
oh man, that's gotta be
amazing. I had a friend that was playing in the league at the time, so he met up with us one night and we hung out. We got to go to this party, like this Bud Light party, and Usher was performing. It was a great weekend, and his only stipulation was that he wanted to be home on Sunday so he could watch it at home.
Okay.
So we left like early Sunday, got back into Lafayette, watched Super Bowl and at home in the comfort of his home. And the funny part is how this ties into wrestling is that Raw was going to be in Lafayette the next night, and yeah, so I have a friend has friends in WWE. So whenever I got back in, I watched the first half with my old man, and then my buddy calls me. He's like, "Yo, come to this bar in town." So I go over there and meet him, and so he's sitting with Michael Cole, I think, who was it? The Highlanders, maybe.
Oh God, I remember that. Yeah,
the Highlanders and John Cena. John Cena was there. So we got to hang out and party with them after the Saints won the Super Bowl. So that's a cool little gem of a story.
Man, that's incredible, because I remember watching it. And I'm like, I don't know. I think they could do it. Like, I think they could do it. And then that Tracy Porter pick, and I was like, oh, they got it. And I'm like, that's got to be such a cool feeling to just, like, with everything that was built up with it being such a long time since they had got any kind of championship run, and just to see that, I'm like, that's got to be so much fun. Fast forward to last season, I got to enjoy it all myself, and I don't know about you. I don't ever want to have to go through a game like that again, which how close that one was. But the feeling to watch my team finally get that title after years and decades of disappointment was all worth it to me.
Well, I feel like the Eagles have had like moderate success, right? Like, you guys might not have won a Super Bowl, but you've been to Super Bowls. Mm-hmm. You've had good teams. You've had all-time great players. The Saints haven't really had any of that. So for this, like for that season, it was kind of like watching with one eye open, because you just knew that somehow they were going to fuck it up.
And that's what I did with the Eagles the whole time. After Wentz got hurt.
Oh man, yeah. So
Yeah, I will. My fiance will tell it. We'll tell the story forever. I didn't have a lick of confidence in Nick Foles until that Hail Mary dropped. I thought they were going to lose. I was like this, because I never thought Foles could go touchdown for touchdown with Tom Brady. come to find out I was wrong. But even when Brady got the ball at the end and like he completed the crossing route to Amendola, I'm like, he's gonna do it again. I've seen this happen too many times in my life to where like I get hyped up and it happens, and then that Hail Mary dropped and like it didn't click for me right away. I was like, wait, hold on, they won. They're champs. They won. It took me like 5 or 10 seconds to kind of process it all because I was like, I just never thought this day would happen.
Yeah, that's pretty much how. Yeah, we shared the same experiences on that one, bro. Because I didn't think that they were gonna win. I just like I said, I just knew something was gonna go wrong for us on that day. But you know, Tracy Porter had other plans.
Absolutely, man. I want to get you out of here. I got 2 more questions for you to get out of here. I am a huge Popeyes connoisseur. I want to know all about this buffet, man. What is this that I see? And I've heard about it. And I want to know all about this because this sounds like magic.
It's I'll say this. It used to be more magical than it is. I haven't been in a cut like probably a few years. But yeah, it's a Popeyes buffet, man. They have the chicken out there. They have your sides. All you can eat. It's like 10, not really expensive, like 10, $12. Yeah, you can do some damage in there, man.
Yeah,
You definitely hurt yourself.
Literally, yeah.
It's a good time, man. For somebody who hasn't been, I definitely recommend it. I didn't know that it was. I didn't know that it wasn't a normal thing until I posted it on Twitter many moons ago.
I got you. Yeah.
And that's kind of how that took off. Was I posted the picture and nobody, like, people couldn't believe it, and I was just like, yo, this is just a thing that we have in Louisiana. We're the only city that has it. So yeah, it kind of took off, but definitely recommend trying it out if you're ever in Louisiana, preferably South Louisiana. It's a good time.
So last question, I ask this to everybody. What was the last thing you watched on WWE Network?
Last thing I watched on WWE Network, man, I was binge watching Raws from 2008.
Okay.
I was trying to catch up or rewatch that Shawn Michaels Chris Jericho feud.
Oh, the No Mercy one with the ladder match.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's a very good feud.
Yeah, I was trying to see it in its entirety. I forgot why. I think I might have stumbled upon a YouTube clip or something. Which they shout out to the people on YouTube who take feuds and angles and like splice them up into like singular videos, because that's great.
Yes.
I've watched so many horsemen get jumped in and out of the group from that. Just figuring, we were young at the time, so I didn't really get who was where, when, and how they became not horsemen. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really get how Luger got kicked out of the Horsemen until I saw it on YouTube.
What was crazy is I didn't realize, because I remember watching it like that as a kid. Like I remember renting the old War Games from like the VHS store. I remember being really confused when the Brainbusters, Arn and Tully, and came over to WWE, and I'm like, wait, these guys were on WCW Saturday Night for all this time. Like, how did
your calendar and your clock as a kid is crazy. Like I didn't, same thing, and it happened with a lot of guys. It's not just the Brainbusters. It's like, wait a minute, he was such and such in WCW. Now he's the stalker in WWF.
Oh my God, that Barry Windham shit. Yes.
Love Barry Windham too, by the way. One of my underrated favorites.
He's one of the favorites. Like I think for me, him, Tully obviously is kind of where this podcast is the play on Tully Blanchard. But one, because I've been binge watching Raw from episode 1. I think I'm on like 567 now. And a couple people I didn't. What's up?
What year is that?
It's the year 2004. I'm at the go home show to WrestleMania 20 now.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, a couple guys that I forgot how good they were. Like Lance Storm is one of them. Regal is one of them. That like I knew Regal was entertaining, but I think like as an adult, like you kind of get a different appreciation of like the mannerisms of a Steven Regal, or like a smoothness of a Lance Storm.
Regal was always good. I thought Lance Storm got a whole lot out of being himself. Like
Yes.
he got a lot of mileage out of being that boring guy. And I can't think of anybody else who has gotten more out of being boring in wrestling than Lance Storm.
Yeah, he never really had like a standout, like he never really had like a standout character, but he always had good matches. He always just, he was solid in what he did. But him, Barry Windham, Regal, Tully Blanchard, like these are all, as going back watching them more as an adult, I have a different appreciation for what they did in the ring.
Right, for sure.
So we're gonna send this one on home for the night. But where can people follow you on Twitter, Kel?
And at Kellen Daniel, KELLENDANIEL. That's all my social medias. That's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that, man. Holla at me. I'm pretty social.
Absolutely, man. So check out all now 79 episodes of this podcast, the Gully Blanchard podcast, by subscribing at Gully Blanchard. It's on all podcasts. Anywhere you find podcasts, where we are. GULLYBLANCHARD. It's also available on NoCoastBias.com. Shout out to Derek, who lets me post that and my wrestling stuff, the wrestling stuff that I write, and then also a Royal Pain for anything Sacramento Kings related. You can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which is GULLYBLANCHARD. Until next week, I'll be joined by Brian Waters from the Wrestling Realm podcast. We'll talk a little bit about, Super Showdown, have a good wrestling conversation like I did today with Kellen. But Kellen, thank you very much for coming on. We'll be back next week. Until then, you guys be good.
Peace.